Hey everybody, this is Chris. Welcome to a Comic Tropes art live stream. Let's see. So, it looks like I've got a good signal strength. I just sent out the links on a few social media channels. And I'm starting this stream a little earlier than I told people, just so that I can allow people some time to filter in. But if you're watching this when it's archived, hello, thank you very much for tuning in. What I do on this, I basically just doodle and take questions from the audience. So, hello, looks like some folks are filtering in. Got, what is this? Scott Sampson, Pokeball in the Grass, Lil Snickers, J. Andrew World. Well, nice to see so many of you. Thanks so much for joining me today. Hope your week is going well. Not going to start drawing quite yet. Just going to give folks plenty of time to filter in. So if you've got any sort of questions, maybe about the show or comics or anything like that, feel free to shout them out. I'll do my best to answer them. Let's see. Hello to Q-Man, Grelzar, Sheldon, Master Omega, Brian Murrer, TARDIS Rider, Ryan, HCC 788. Let's see. And Ace says, have you ever wanted to draw an independent comic? Well, I have. I've actually drawn several of them that I can think of. There was one called Woman of Action. That was with Chris Sims, who writes for Marvel now. I wrote a bunch of stuff with a group of friends over like 10 years when I lived in DC. We self-published all sorts of anthologies with different themes like horror, war, romance, science fiction. Worked with plenty of people. So I've done tons of independent comics, actually. Thanks for subscribing, Doug. Appreciate it. Oh, yes. Scott Sampson says, ever watch What We Do in the Shadows? Fantastic movie. Hilarious. So good. Probably the funniest by that director. What's his name? All of a sudden I'm blanking. The guy that did Thor Ragnarok, most of you. Taika Waititi. I've watched all of his films. He does a lot of stuff down in New Zealand. Great movies. But What We Do in the Shadows is a hilarious fake documentary about vampires down there. RC joins us. What's the weirdest utensil you use to draw with? I wouldn't say I've necessarily experimented with anything too weird, but I have used like an old toothbrush. You dip it in some ink and then you just sort of like flick the bristles and it'll give you like a good spatter of ink, which you can use to indicate things like, maybe blood splatter or maybe like, just some sort of debris exploding. So you can get some really cool. You can also dip it in like whiteout and flick it, and you can get some interesting starscapes if you've already blacked out a page. So maybe that's a little weird. Let's say Pokeball in the Grass says, would you call me by my real name? No, I won't call you by that actual name. Thanks, Doug. Will you draw Police Cop or The Tick or Spawn? Spawn I actually will. So what I'm doing these days is I'm supporting a friend's, what do you call it? Not a Kickstarter. It's a crowdfunding campaign to help him out. GoFundMe? Yeah, GoFundMe. So I decided I would take a certain number of commissions. I would do 15 commissions. And those slots, I believe, have been filled. And I'm in the process of going through those. But one of them did have a request for Spawn. So I'll be doing that. Let's see. James is here and Ryan. I did get in-game tickets today. Actually, technically, my fiance bought them for us, so that's really nice. Did I know that the director of Thor Ragnarok was in the Green Lantern movie? I did know that. Have you seen the in-game trailer? I think I've seen them all. Let's see. Clayton joins us, and Mike, The Danger Show. Jason Jeffers. All right, so we've still got like about 5 minutes till I said I would start. So I had a request to draw Rocket Raccoon, and what I decided to do to make life a little easier for myself is I actually own one of those Hot Toys 6th scale action figures. They're very detailed, so I used this as reference. I've got a photo of it for reference. So Some people are curious about that because, of course, I did do an episode that a lot of people have seen about Greg Land. And people thought that I was complaining about him using reference. And just to be clear, I don't think that using reference is bad. I think that if you're using exclusively reference and you've got panel-to-panel characters looking different, that's the problem. You can be over-reliant on reference. Using like famous photos that you didn't take, I don't think is necessarily the best. But if you take your own reference photos and your work is consistent, I definitely do not have a problem with using reference. I think that Brian Hitch and James Robinson are two artists that definitely use plenty of reference, and in my opinion, their work looks fantastic. So I was just trying to make that clear that I don't think using reference in and of itself is bad at all. Are Hot Toys the only figures you collect, or do you collect Marvel Legends or Revoltech? I don't collect anything else. Just some of the Hot Toys, and every once in a while, like Donatello from Ninja Turtles. If there's that's a weird collection that I have, but that's it. What helps you figure out poses and how to draw guns? Just practice from drawing from real life usually. Like if depending on how fast this goes, I've got another request to draw Hush from Batman. That's a pretty normal, mundane like person. That one I would definitely do completely from scratch. I don't think I need reference for that, but I could potentially use some reference like looking at it for the handguns that he carries. What helps you let's see, reference is good. That's usually why artists have character turnarounds to help keep consistency. Sure. Have you been reading Heroes in Crisis? I haven't. I've heard some good reviews, but I haven't read it. Sorry, haven't read it. Did you see that Joker poster? I think so. If you're talking about the same one. Well, here's the thing. There's so many Joker iterations right now. It's hard to know. Did they release a Joker poster for that upcoming movie by Todd Phillips? If so, that I haven't seen anything of. What I did see was a poster for Joker from the Gotham TV show. And it's pretty horrific. He's he's got like acid pockmarks all over his face and hardly any hair. It's quite disturbing. I don't watch the Gotham show. People tell me it's absolutely bonkers. So maybe I need to try that out someday. You can get posable dolls to help you with the human figure. Yeah, you can. And then what I like to do are a couple things. You have to use reference every once in a while to get the fundamentals down. And then if you want to draw comics specifically, you have to sometimes set the reference aside and try to draw what's in your memory, because that's how you loosen up and you can create consistent faces and good posable hands. If you're purely using reference, it's probably going to look stiff panel to panel. So one thing I like to do is I go to Dr. Sketchy's every once in a while. That's like a franchise that's in most cities, and you basically will go to, they have it at a bar. You pay a small fee and you get timed poses with a burlesque dancer. They do a show. They usually give you a drink or two. It's a really good time. I also like going to zoos and parks and just drawing what I see. So I'll do that for reference, and then every once in a while you just have to sit down and doodle and try to loosen everything up. Gin and tonic. Gonna try to loosen myself up. Do you sketch or freehand? Both. Constantly trying to go back and forth. All film Jokers should have to wear makeup over a mustache in honor of the one true Joker, Cesar Romero. That's awesome. As a kid, I never noticed that mustache. As an adult, I always notice it right away, and it's legit hilarious. All right. So, it's 7 o'clock, so I think I will start doodling around, trying to get this Rocket Raccoon in a workable shape. And I might miss some questions. I'm definitely not ignoring anyone. Feel free to keep asking, and I will do my best to keep poking my head up, take a question, hopefully tell some stories, and just take it from there. So I'm doing some of these fine details on Rocket's face with a nothing fancier than a technical pen, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, the Lego minifigure of Cesar Romero had the painted over mustache. I love that. Big fan of Lego. Big fan of some of the little funny details they will put in. Actually, I think what I want to do before I get too deep into doing fine details is just find the basic outline with a thicker brush pen and take it from there. I just want to give him some nice sweeping outlines, indicate just a little fur so it's not perfectly smooth, but overall like easy to identify him hopefully from his silhouette. That's what I'm going to just try to bang in here. And then after that I can go back in with a technical pen to fill in any sort of detail that I feel that I've missed. Have I ever owned How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way? Yeah, it's a great tool. It's been a long time since I've looked at it. I don't own it anymore. I sold it years ago. I wish I'd sort of kept it because I would like to take sort of a reminder look at it, but someday maybe I'll get a new copy. Thing that amazes me about the Rocket Raccoon that was created for the Marvel Cinematic Universe is just how expressive he is, and yet he still looks like a raccoon. I feel like it's just a very good digital creation. My sister just texted me to say that she's watching, so hello, sister. Nice to hear from you. Hello, Quiet Spruce. Let's see. Kirkman's Invincible is my favorite comic of all time. That's awesome to hear, Billy. Did you see any of my sketches back in the early issues? Let's see. What's my favorite comic of all time? Maybe Y the Last Man. I really enjoy that one. That one stands out right now. Hooded Cobra Commander 788 says, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way is a great book for beginners. It doesn't give you everything, but it's a good start. That's a really great way of looking at it, and I totally agree. And it's fun. If I'm remembering right, that is John Buscema that's the artist throughout most of that anyway, right? It has been many years since I've sold it, so I think I'm remembering right, though. Thoughts on Bendis Bagley's Ultimate Spider-Man run? Overall, I like that quite a bit. There are some issues that I have with it. I think parts of it early on have sort of dated, just because it was trying to be so sort of new and of the moment that I think some of the sort of slang and stuff has sort of dated. But that's more on Bendis. I do think Bagley's artwork holds up pretty well, and I just like that it sort of tells a more or less complete story for that version of Peter Parker. That's something I like a lot, and I really like the character of Miles Morales, and he continues to evolve. I think that the movie has helped him tremendously to have even more character than Bendis originally gave him. Anyway, yeah, I like it. I think it holds up pretty well. I think it makes for good sort of binge reading, if that makes sense. Chris's sister should be a band name. Guess I'll give up. Don't give up. What are you going to give up on? Junior was the main artist, although the reference panels come from all over. Okay, I remember Raccoon had a 4-issue miniseries. Yeah, that was back in the 80s with covers by Mike Mignola. Do I think the Beta Ray Bill version of Thor would work in the MCU? No question, no question. I think that they should continue the Thor movies, and if Hemsworth needs to move on, I like the idea of like maybe doing a female Thor. Now, obviously, Natalie Portman has zero interest in coming back. You know, she didn't really seem to love doing those movies. But I think, like, because it's the movie universe, you maybe make a change and consider making it Lady Sif that becomes Thor, and give, like, Beta Ray Bill as sort of like a co-star, because Sif and Beta Ray Bill actually had a romance in the comics. I think that could be interesting. Let's see. Fate says, I was trying to get you to see one of my chats. Your videos are really great, and they really help me learn what not to do while planning my future comic book and hopefully career when I'm older. Oh, well, that's wonderful. Am I a writer or artist? Well, sort of. I mean, I've done a bunch of kind of everything in comics, from coloring to editing to lettering to writing and illustrating. Haven't done a lot of, like... Well, I guess I haven't really done any mainstream, like, superhero stuff, but I have had a few books that were, like, you know, big releases that are in bookstores and stuff. Colonial Comics Volume 1 and 2 and Trickster are all sort of educational comics that had big releases. Trickster was nominated for an Eisner, so that's a little bit of a feather in my cap, I consider. And then I've done a lot of independent stuff that's, you know, not really in print or anything anymore, but I've done plenty of that. And it all forms a great sort of background of experience. I encourage everybody to do as much of everything they can in comics so that they can really get a well-rounded idea of what everybody does. I don't know what the Glyph Awards are, J. Andrew. I'm curious. Will you do an episode on the tropes of Mark Millar? I have. What is this? Says maybe Valkyrie could be the new Thor. That would work too. I like the idea, though, of like maybe doing a female Thor. I like keep the Thor movies going. I mean, how fun was Ragnarok? If they could sort of keep that cosmic craziness, I think that they should definitely do more. I think that there's a big audience for it. Let's see. I'm not sure if Valkyrie could carry a film yet. I mean, wait a minute. Like, that's Tessa Thompson. And, you know, if you're talking Tessa Thompson from, like, you know, 10, 15 years ago, maybe I'd agree. But, like, at this point, she's been in some pretty big movies, man. I think that she could carry a movie. What was that movie she just did this past year? Was it, it's the one about the telemarketer, is it called How Can I Help You? It's something like that. How Can I Help? That, she was awesome in that. I say kill Thor and start making Fantastic Four movies. Well, I don't know if you have to kill Thor, but I do think that, like, there's a lot of room to do a good Fantastic Four movie. I think it should be... I think it should really focus on the family, and I think that you really need to like really lean into the cosmic stuff and the exploration, the idea of a family of explorers. Released the 90s movie already, yeah. When will we get a Wonder Man movie? We probably will someday. So I was about to say never, but you know what? Like, 15 years from now, I predict we'll have a rebooted MCU and we'll get like a Wonder Man movie or something. Like he'll end up being like one of the most popular characters in the next Avengers. Who knows? I'm kind of just joking around, but I could definitely see it happening. Alright, what else? Punisher 2004 was a very good adaptation. Yeah, that was alright. Have you considered reviewing Zot or other work by Scott McCloud? I have considered it. I'll have to keep thinking about it because I don't know if I've got like an angle on that yet. A Quasar TV show as a sitcom is actually not a bad idea at all. Hello, Ator, and hello, Astro Kid. Hello to a bunch of people that have joined in. Clay. I'm really happy I turned notifications on for this channel so I don't miss streams. Cool. I'm glad you only lightly tapped the button. I'd feel very guilty if you broke your computer because of me. Other channels will ask you to smash that subscribe button, but me, a like click will do. Because that's the kind of guy I am this week. Feels kind of warm here. I don't know what the weather's like for all of you, but it is. It became spring very fast out here in the Seattle area. It just sort of like we went from like having a lot more snow than we typically get to all of a sudden it was just like warm days, and I was able to start wearing shorts at work. It was kind of amazing how quickly it shifted. And today I feel like it's actually kind of not uncomfortably warm, but just I really feel it. Whoop. That's the sound of me making lines. Whoop. I've decided on some topics for the near future I'm pretty excited about. I think folks will like it. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I do my best to vary it up with, topics that include foreign comics, older comics, indie comics, but still a good mix of mainstream stuff. I definitely have some name creators that I'll be covering very soon. So I think that like stuff definitely appeals to a broader audience. But I feel like I feel a sort of responsibility, you might say, to, if I'm going to talk about comics, to really talk about the full breadth of comics and just what they can do as a medium as compared to just breaking down the latest crossover storyline and just explaining it literally to you. I want to cover stuff that you know so that you can sort of like agree or disagree, but I also want to cover stuff that maybe you've never heard of. That's important to me. But anyway, that said, I definitely have some mainstream stuff coming up. What is your fave comic of those available under the public domain? That's an interesting question, actually. You know what would be fun? Like, to try to do a comic based on Red Reuben. So I posted this on, like, Twitter this past week. Any of you that watch my channel may have seen the recent Captain Marvel Shazam episode, where I talked about how popular he was in the 40s. The golden age of comics. Captain Marvel was definitely the most popular superhero. And that didn't go unnoticed. In fact, there were some companies that basically ripped him off. If you look at the lawsuit between DC Comics saying Captain Marvel is a ripoff of Superman, you're like, no, they're different enough. But there are characters that are clearly a ripoff of Captain Marvel. Let me take a drink. I'm glad you tried Brat Pack, Ryan. Hello, Seahots. So, Captain Marvel, doing tremendously. It's about 3 years into his run. It's 1943, and Archie Comics, or as they were called back then, MLJ, decided they were going to do a similar superhero. They used to do a bunch of superheroes before they were purely Archie and Archie-related stories. They created this character called Red Reuben. Forget the superhero name. It's stupid, but just... So you've got Red Reuben. And his real name is, he's a teenager, orphan, just like Billy Batson, and his name is Reuben. And he finds out that every previous male in his lineage was also named Reuben. And he goes to a haunted house, and it's full of the ghosts of his ancestors, and he realizes that if he says, "Hey Rube," as though he's calling out like his previous ancestors. He gets a power from each of the ghosts. Like one ghost is really smart, one ghost is really strong, one ghost is really fast. Exactly like Shazam. So he just says, "Hey Rube," and he transforms into a super-powered adult. It's such a clear ripoff. But his costume is just no shirt, pants, and a cape. So it's not flattering at all. And his name is the Red Rube, which doesn't sound flattering. That's in the public domain because, of course, it didn't do well. And like why would Archie even bother to keep that in print? They don't need that as their trademark. So that's something that's in the public domain that I honestly think is so bad that it's funny. I think that you could have a lot of fun with that. I haven't been reading Immortal Hulk, but I did flip through a couple of the recent issues at the comic book store a couple weeks back, and it looked really cool. No, I know Yard Ape is saying Rube like a mark at the circus. No, that's not what they mean, but that's what it sounds like. It's purely just like calling like Christopher Chris. They're saying instead of Reuben, Rube. But it makes him sound dumb. Reuben. Well, thanks for the compliment, Jeff. Let's see, you also had the Green Mask, who was also a boy who would turn into an adult superhero when he saw injustice. He often had to shout, "Yow." Oh boy, I don't know about that one. Yikes. Superman couldn't fly until Captain Marvel came out. Sort of true. He did just leap, and Captain Marvel was like flying by his second issue. Arguably by his first, but it looks more like he's leaping in the first issue. That said, really, when Superman started to fly was two things. One was the radio show, because it was just easier to say, like, "Look, up in the sky," and, that whole thing. And just say that he was flying as compared to saying, like, he's jumping all over the place. Also, at just about the same time, they did those Fleischer cartoons, and it takes a lot more panels to draw somebody jumping up and down than it does to just have them leap into the air and then they're flying. So he flew in the cartoons, and then they quickly adopted that into the comic, following the radio and cartoon iterations. So yeah, it's not quite like it was necessarily ripping anything off. It was just coming from a couple different weird sources. Thanks for so many people like showing up. It's always nice to be able to draw when you've got sort of people to talk to. It's less lonely. There was an android called Captain Marvel. That's true. James points this out. And HCC says he loves the Max Fleischer cartoons. They're really well done, especially for the time, but they're really well done. The animation's great. Yeah, anyway, James is mentioning that there was an android Captain Marvel by yet another company, not Marvel, DC, or Fawcett, and he could split his body apart into different limbs. Yeah, I did consider sort of like getting into that in my episode, and then I was like, no, I mean, I really want to focus primarily on the golden age rise and fall of Captain Marvel. That was sort of the topic that I decided I wanted to address, and I didn't want to distract too much by covering absolutely everything to do with him. I would have even ignored the Marvel stuff, but it really did come into play because of how he got renamed Shazam eventually. So sort of felt like I had to mention that in some level. In some level? On some level is what I meant to say. All right. What do you think about Paul Pope? I think Paul Pope is awesome, man. He's a great artist. That would be a really interesting video to do. I saw him back in, let me think what year, probably 2003 at the Small Press Expo in Baltimore, Maryland that year. He was doing a panel alongside Frank Miller and supposed to also have Will Eisner, but unfortunately Will Eisner's health wasn't so great, so he wasn't able to make it. And but that's okay. You know, Frank Miller and Paul Pope, definitely an interesting duo. And they were just sort of talking about how comics are sort of also propaganda, because there's such a small creative team even when you're collaborating. So it's like really one person's vision a lot of times that will get like shared, and how that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that is still sort of what it is it's sort of propaganda on some level, with a person really espousing their beliefs very clearly through comics. It was an interesting idea. Yeah. Good panel. Will Eisner used to draw the Spirit. Yes, he created the Spirit. 100% him. I do not have a Tarp Mills episode in the pipeline, but I will definitely consider it. Comment from one of the viewers here to Hooded Cobra Commander saying that they're looking forward to his review of Marvel's G.I. Joe number 21. Yeah, that was probably the most famous comic from G.I. Joe's run. Larry Hama not only wrote that, as he wrote pretty much almost all of the Marvel issues, minus a very small handful of fill-in issues, but he also illustrated it. A lot of people can sort of forget that Larry Hama broke into comics as an illustrator, working on stuff like, Iron Fist. And G.I. Joe number 21 is a fantastic issue. It's famous because it's the so-called silent issue. Most of that had to do with deadlines, but basically there's no dialogue in it, and it still reads very clear exactly what's happening and what people's motivations are. You could say that the comic sort of took a bigger turn at that point in time, becoming more serialized and starting to really dig into ongoing character arcs. So anyway, that's something that Hooded Cobra Commander has coming up very soon. This week, I'm pretty sure. This week. Right, Brian? Namor has little wings on his ankles that help him fly. They make him fly. I think that Marvel has explicitly said that's how he flies. They've never really bothered to explain how such tiny little wings on ankles make him fly, but that's how he flies. Also, that makes him a mutant, just like the X-Men. He is also a hybrid, half Atlantean, half human, but those little anklet wings are because he's also a mutant. Didn't Bill Mantlo create Rocket Raccoon? He did. And Bill is still with us. Anyone that knows his history knows that it's a bit of a sad one. He was rollerblading and he got hit by a hit-and-run driver, and now has permanent short-term memory loss. Like, he can't remember things for very long. So he's in like permanent care. His brother takes care of him at some sort of, I don't know, home or something. But it is sad because he was an interesting guy. He created a lot of interesting, weird characters and stuff. He did a lot of stuff in the 80s. Like, he would take a lot of comics that were based on like toys and stuff like that. Bill was like, yeah, I'll do it. A lot of people didn't want to do that because generally working on licensed stuff like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers or in his case, Micronauts and ROM Space Knight, doesn't pay as well because it didn't always sell as well. There's an audience for it, but it was a smaller audience. It was a younger audience, and it generally was not a super prized job compared to roles on something like Spider-Man or Batman, famous high-profile characters that could net you good royalties. But Bill Mantlo had no problem accepting those jobs. He was like, no, I'll do it. And he created a lot of fun stuff that a lot of people of a certain age remember with a lot of fondness. So, but yeah, he was injured and requires permanent care now. He can't take care of himself. Marvel got Bill a new house and live-in nurse after the Cloak and Dagger show and Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And that is good. That is good. But I'll tell you something that's interesting. Think about this. It's like Marvel shouldn't have necessarily had to step up in that way. They should have had to step up, in my opinion, in a different way. When we hear these sad stories about various creators that have fallen on hard times, Russ Heath was one that I did an episode about like several months back. There's artists who've fallen on hard times. They can't really work as much anymore, and they've got no income. Thing is, these people didn't have typical jobs. They had contract work, so there's no comic book union. And what this means is that, like, a lot of our favorite artists and writers have no permanent, like, sort of exit plan for retirement. They have no permanent healthcare solutions. And I'm of the opinion that, like, big places like Marvel and DC should have, like, optional healthcare plans that, like, their contractors could elect into. I think that there should be group health plans that they could get into so that it could help them, especially later in life. Yeah, Mike Becker is saying it's kind of similar to the John Oliver story on WWE this Sunday. And by the way, HBO put that up on YouTube, and it is interesting. I love pro wrestling, but the WWE is pretty bad in the regard that it does not really take care of its employees' health because of they use sort of legal loopholes. And comics isn't that much different, unfortunately. It really isn't. Wrestlers get a lot of GoFundMe fundraisers now to pay for their health care. Yeah, and sometimes so do comic creators. And I'll tell you something. I'll promote them if, I want the comic creator to get help, and I will pitch in sometimes when I can afford it. I'm not against those, but what's sad is that they're necessary. They shouldn't be necessary. There should be healthcare plans for comic book artists. It's a real job, and there should be an exit plan for when they, say get old, and what if they get arthritis and they can't use their hand very well anymore? What if their eyesight fails? That stuff happens all the time. This is their career, and all of a sudden, what can they do? Yeah. They're called private contractors, so they can't unionize. It's an issue. It's just something I would encourage everybody to look into and make an informed opinion on where you stand, because if we enjoy this kind of entertainment, we should probably have an opinion on the policies that take care of these people as well. Because I don't think any of us want to just take from these creators. We appreciate what they give us, and we want them to be able to, either retire with grace or, God forbid they have, cancer or an accident like Bill Mantlo had where he gets hit by a car. You want them to have, an insurance plan. And right now that's an option, but it's not really a realistic, affordable option. We need to figure out a way to solve that. We being everybody, not just us here. Anyway, I guess that was pretty heavy stuff to lay on y'all. Sorry, but it is important. I mean, I don't know. I really care about the creators, I mean, I love the stories, obviously, but I'm at a point where I really love the creators that have given me this entertainment and continue to give me this entertainment and these interesting viewpoints. So I care about how their lives are lived. And I bet most of you do too. I'm not hip to the inside stuff, at least not from the last 20 years. Let's see. Marvel and... Oh, hello. Looks like hit me with a can of Campbell's soup because I just got a super chat. Speaking of fan support. Very kind of you, Andrew. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I do have a full-time job, and fortunately it gives me benefits. But I would love to someday potentially do this full-time, at which point I would need to pay through the wazoo for... a private health insurance plan. And that's just how it is. That's why you can't just do okay at YouTube. You have to do very well because you have to be prepared for those rainy nights. But thank you. That's so kind of you. Mucho appreciato, as no one says. I knew I'd be able to draw just Rocket Raccoon if I wanted to, but I also knew that if I had to sort of make up a sci-fi gun, it's not something I'm great at personally. It's something I definitely struggle with, like coming up with like the detail and stuff. I wish I had the kind of mind of somebody like Kim Jong-il, if you've ever seen his work. Wow. That guy's a master. He can draw motorcycles completely from memory with incredible technical detail. I can't really draw like sci-fi stuff like that purely from memory all the time. It takes quite a while. Kim Jong-il, that's a guy that I wish did more comics. He mostly just does sort of pin-ups, illustrations, and fantastic work. He does a lot of teaching. But man, I'd love to see him do more comics. He's only done a few. Whoa, did I just get another super chat? I'm sorry. Did I miss something? No, it was Andrew's. Okay. Isn't that why Chris Claremont ended Sovereign 7 the way he did, so that he could keep the rights of the characters? That may be true. Kim is like a Kirby beast. Comic creators were started to be treated better thanks to the efforts of Neil Adams back in the 70s. Neil Adams did do a lot to say, like, hey, you guys got to take care of person X, Y, and Z. But, and he did sort of start his own, comics company and stuff. But, yeah, I feel like things didn't really kick off until Image made it much more viable in the 90s. There were definitely plenty of creator-owned publishers throughout, like, the 80s primarily, a little bit of the 70s, but most of them didn't really last very long. I think that Image really created a workable model, and it's really cool what they've done. Took them quite a while to get to where they are, that they can do that for other creators and make it viable. Oh, I found a new sitcom that seems like it's hilarious. I've only watched a little of it, but it was on Amazon Prime, and I tried Catastrophe with Rob Delaney and who's the lady? Something like Susan Hogarth. Oh, geez, I can't remember her name now. But the show is called Catastrophe, and I thought it was really funny. So, gets a recommend from me, I think. I need to watch more. I've only watched a little bit of it so far, but that was pretty darn funny. Maybe some of you already know of it, because there's been like 4 seasons. iSketchin says, hey everyone. Oh man, 43 minutes missed. Well, it's all archived. Let's see. It's important to keep in mind the profit margins for comics after the golden age was not very big. That's true. That's true. People did it for the passion. But it should be viable. Everybody likes stories. Comics are great. Comics should definitely have a bigger platform than they do. Scott asks me if I've ever seen Better Off Ted, and while I've heard of it, I have to say no, I have not seen that show. Was that the show that Portia de Rossi did right before she signed up with Arrested Development? I'm trying to remember. I always hope you'll do an episode on Rachel Pollack. Well, I probably should do more episodes on various female creators, so I will keep that in mind. Always appreciate the suggestions. Just keep in mind also, folks, that I have to, by the nature of how, the sort of production schedule on my YouTube show, I have to plan ahead fairly far in advance. So if you have a suggestion and I don't get right to it, that is not like me necessarily ignoring a suggestion. It's purely a reality of the time it takes to research and write, sort of do the pre-production work, you might say, on the episodes that I create. Because I don't just wing it. I did actually in the first few episodes I ever made. I sort of winged it a little more, but as time went on, I felt that the only way to be sure that I got my points across was to go with a full script. My sister's texting me because she's watching. Gene, you're allowed to, text in the chat room, but she says she's glad I'm drawing Rocket Raccoon and that she's surprised I only just found out about Catastrophe. Well, surprise. I've got a great sister. She lives on the other side of the country where we grew up, and I miss her. And it's hard to be away from your family. Sometimes you have to go where work takes you, and that's sort of my case. I've moved around the country depending on work opportunities. You can't figure out how to log in. You just use your Google login, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. How about any of you guys? Any of you sort of separated from your family because of work or anything else? It can be a challenge sometimes. I mean, one thing that's nice is where we live. We live near my fiance's family, so we're not like completely alone. But it just means that I don't get to see my sister or my parents very often. So that can be tough. That can be a tough situation. Do you ever have help in the production of your videos? Not really. I pretty much do everything myself. I definitely don't want to discount the help that I will sometimes solicit from others. Chrissy, my fiance, will sometimes hold a camera for something, something like that, or maybe help me get a prop. So, and she's very, supportive of the work that I do. And sometimes I will ask friends for help with maybe sort of research maybe on a topic. But generally, I basically do 100% of it myself, from writing the episode to, planning it, and then obviously I'm the one on camera saying everything that I wrote, and I also edit it myself. So generally, I do pretty much the entire thing. I would love to be able to sort of hand off some aspects, but the one thing that would be easiest to sort of get help on would be something like, for instance, the editing, right? Because other people definitely have that that skill and could do that while I'm doing other aspects. However, the editing is really where you shape the story and how you pace it, and if there's any jokes, like get the timing right. That's a lot of responsibility to hand off onto somebody else. If you want to like add something as simple as a silly sound effect or like exactly where to cut something, it may sound minor, but that's very important to me to control right now. Favorite writer and artist, Chris? It does change. I would say that these days favorite writer is Ed Brubaker, but Brian K. Vaughan is way up there as well. As far as artist, I'd have to think about that some more. Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head who I'd say for that. Sorry. Personally, I had to keep distance from my family as we don't agree on a lot of things. Oh, that sounds tough. All right. Separation gives me peace of mind, but I visit often because there's still a lot of love. Totally get that. Totally do get that. Yeah. How about doing a show on Kurt Swanson? Yep. Kurt Swanson is definitely somebody I need to do an episode on. Very important figure in comics. Did some very important work for many, many, many years on Superman. So yeah, and I would love to do that. I love Kurt Swan's work on Superman and his art style. So solid, and maybe not always flashy, but you go back and you just realize the characters are easily identifiable. They're expressive. The action from panel to panel is clean. There's good establishing shots. There's just so much in terms of good fundamentals. And he just really, in the end, may still be my definitive version of how Superman should look, is the way Kurt Swan would draw him. So it stays with you. Some artists just stay with you. Just read they're filming the new Dune movie. Oh, wow. Hooded Cobra Commander 788 asks a very serious question. Have whoever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? Yeah, I'll tell you, I have, and it was terrible. It was really horrifying. Hello, how is your day going? Can't really complain, Koala. I tried my hand at editing over 20 years ago doing community television. It was mind-numbingly awful. How long does it take to video edit for a typical YouTube video? It takes a long time for some episodes. I will say that. Like, I would say ballpark is going to be at least 8 hours to edit a video, at least. And if it's an episode where I'm doing the history of something, where there's a lot of issues involved as compared to just one, that can go easily out to something like 15 hours of editing, because it's just the time to gather all the resources. How are the Devil's dancing skills? Terrible. He insists on doing light tap, even when the song isn't appropriate. So, in that regard, terrible. But he'll keep telling you that he's doing great. He likes to gaslight people. He just keeps saying, no, I'm doing great. Everybody loves this. I'm like, it's not working. That's why it's terrible. The gaslighting. The constant lies. Son of a Redshirt says, Rocket's looking great so far. Have you ever considered a show on Max Fleischer? I know he wasn't a comic book artist per se. However, he really made a mark. Yeah, that's true. It is something I definitely have a good time doing an episode on. It would probably be a little lower priority right now because I'd prefer to, if I have to sort of like choose my topics, there's a lot of specifically comic artists that I would like to continue to address. However, I would love if I got to a point where I somehow had more time, and who knows how that would ever happen, but if I had more time, then yes, that would be something that would be a blast to add to the channel. It's a great idea, and it's definitely relevant and something that I think a lot of the audience would like. So it's really just a question of time. But that's the biggest factor in my show. I wish I could create more. I do, but I promise I am stretched about as thin as possible. Like, doing these commissions right now is definitely taking the last of my free time as it stands right now. But that's just how it is. Why not hand off some responsibilities to Infotron? Infotron knows things, but he doesn't have common sense. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is basically when you continue to lie to someone even when they know that you're lying, and you just keep up the lies. And sometimes that does actually change a certain portion of the population's point of view. There's a lot of politicians that will basically gaslight. They'll just keep saying, no, I never said that. And a certain part of the audience will eventually say, like, yeah, he didn't really say that. That's sort of one example of gaslighting. It's also a product of like abuse, like in relationships and stuff. Like when, like I don't know. I think I've explained it. It's dark stuff, but I was talking about the devil, so I don't really feel too bad. I have been fighting some of the worst depression of my life, folks. But keeping busy and talking to people like this is definitely a highlight. Definitely some of the better times. And I won't go too much more with that, because I know it's very depressing to hear about, and I don't want to depress others. But boy, oh boy, just having a really rough time with things these days. Keeping it together. Let's see. I don't think that's gaslighting. I hope that's a joke. I think it's a joke. Max Fleischer also did Popeye and Felix the Cat. Yeah, there's a lot to like about Max Fleischer. Am I going to any cons this year? Yes, I did go for one day to Emerald City Comic Con. That was just a couple weeks ago. That was local here in Seattle. But I do plan on, I think it's October. I forget whether it's September or October. I do plan on going to the New York Comic Con. That's a pretty big one. Not like tabling or anything, just attending for at least a day. I like to go to that every year with one of my best friends from college, and Chrissy, and my best friend's wife and kid. Like, that's just a thing that we love doing every year. Well, you've seen, I think there've been like at least 2 episodes of my show where I've filmed there. So that's a convention I really enjoy. It is massive. It is kind of overwhelming unless you know what you want to do. Aside from that, that's probably the only conventions I'm going to go to this year. I really don't have a lot of free time to dedicate to something like that. I can usually do like 1 or 2 trips a year, but even since I've started this channel, it's been important to me to continue to release weekly episodes. So if I take a trip, that means that I need to start making extra episodes ahead of time and then put them on a timed, like, scheduled release, so that y'all still have episodes while I'm unable to make new ones. So I've done that a few times, like when I've gone to England and Japan and Hong Kong. I've done episodes in Los Angeles and New York City and Boston. I try to, if I can, record an episode like related to the location that I'm going to. But that's not something I can usually edit until I get back. When are we going to start seeing your new Flat Earth video? Oh, L.S. Krieger, I'm so sorry you didn't understand that, but that was an April Fool's joke. Yeah, that was a hilarious, hilarious April Fool's joke. I want to talk sensory indulgence tanks sometime. I heard about it on John Rodan podcast. Okay. Who do you think would win in a three-way battle, a death match between Incredible Hulk, Kool-Aid Man, or Super Saiyan 3 Goku? Kool-Aid Man would never kill, so he's out. That leaves us with Hulk and Super Saiyan 3 Goku. And since I don't know who Super Saiyan 3 Goku is, I'm going to err on the side of caution and say that he would win. So there you go. I'm drawing Swamp Thing right now, broskies. Cool, Clayton. Swamp Thing's badass. Broke, Flat Earth Theory. Woke, Neil Adams, Hollow Earth Theory. Yeah, when I do Neil Adams at some point, I'll have to get into that. He believes that the Earth is hollow, and it just keeps growing. It's a really weird idea. He has a weird conspiracy theory idea. Saitama versus Savage Hulk. Saitama is One Punch Man, right? So One Punch Man. I would prefer a video about the Lizard Man Illuminati conspiracies myself. Well, you're gonna get them. Oh, the lizards control everything. How do you think that I'm just drawing this because I want to? No, it's because the lizard men told me to. They've got their hooks in me. They've got their hooks in all of us. Enjoy. Now bear with me as I go in here to just do a little bit of fine detail on Rocket's mouth so that his teeth stand out a little bit. Got his little razor teeth. Alright, thank you, Rocket. And give him some whiskers here. And I don't see too many raccoons where I live, but I grew up south of Boston, and we used to have raccoons all the time in our backyard and on our porch and stuff like that. I had an outdoor cat back then, and he was kind of a tough guy, actually. I liked him, and I liked him a lot. And he used to fight raccoons. I was like, "Stop! You're gonna get hurt." But I guess he always won. He was a pretty big guy. I wouldn't do that anymore. If you live in certain areas, maybe you can get away with having an outdoor cat, but I always live in the city now, and I just can't let my cats out. They're happier this way. I'm definitely a bit of a cat nerd. I love my cats. I don't know. I find cats so relaxing and cute and funny. That's my thing. Let's see. Alex Jones, Bill Hicks, CIA operative. That's it. Ever considered a show on comics that had 5-year completed story arcs like Y the Last Man or Hitman? Yes. I'm sure that at some point I actually will talk specifically about Y the Last Man. I hope that wasn't your Macho Man impression. No. Macho Man is more like this. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get some Mountain Dew. And I know that isn't quite the octave that I need to be at, but yeah. If you let your cat out, it'll never come back. Maybe. Ever read Oming's The Victories? No, but that sounds interesting. Michael Ivan Oming is a talented guy. I hear that he's working on a new Dick Tracy comic, so that could be interesting. I don't know whether it's, like just more adventures set back then, or if it's set in like the modern day. I don't know anything more about it. I just had heard that that's something he's working on, and sounds kind of cool. I think Dick Tracy is an interesting character that has had some very weird stories also. What else? Cats are the best. Thank you. Do you look at a picture when drawing these, or are these freehand originals? Depends on the drawing. This specific one is, I said this at the beginning of the episode. I have a Hot Toys Rocket Raccoon. It's a 6th scale, very posable, very, very detailed action figure, and so that's what I used for this. That explains why he has his costume from the what do you call it, the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and this specific weapon, but that was also based on the request of the commission. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. All right, looks like I'm getting kind of close to having most of Rocket's details done. I just need to finish his gun and a little bit of shadowing, stuff like that. And I think it's going all right. Let's see, what questions do we have? Taika Waititi is supposedly in line to make a live-action Akira movie, according to GameSpot. It all depends on the cast, but I can see Taika Waititi doing a good job on that. He's a very talented director. It'll get made someday. It's taken a long time, but it'll get made someday. Getting texts from my sister while I'm trying to draw. It's very rude. Ignore all the nice things I said about her earlier. She's a menace. I want pictures. Pictures of my sister committing crimes. She's a masked menace. All right, let's see if this is... rabid raccoon in her town last week. Be careful. Gotta watch out for those rabid raccoons. Isn't it funny, like, how good... maybe this is just me, but I feel like Bradley Cooper's voice as Rocket Raccoon is really good, and I'm always surprised when I think about the fact that that's Bradley Cooper. I just wouldn't expect him to sort of have that thick, almost sort of New York accent that he gives Rocket. But I think it works really, really well. It's also funny to think that they've got Vin Diesel doing Groot. It's been a fun stream. Good night, Chris. Good night. I appreciate you jumping in. I want to see a cat movie where the dogs are the evil ones and for it to be in 3D. Yeah. They're going to shoot in California for Akira? They are? I don't think so. I don't know how they can do that. Unless it's all green screened, I guess. But if that was the case, that doesn't make financial sense. They'd need to film it in like Australia or Canada or something. England even. That doesn't make sense. By the way, not saying you're wrong. I don't know anything about it. Just saying that that would be a weird decision is all. His voice is the default voice I hear when reading comics with Rocket. Yeah, I do too. They've already gotten like $20 million in subsidies from the state of California. Really? Yeah, Son of a Richard points out some of Bradley Cooper's roles that he's famous for, but to me, he'll always be that young theater director in Wet Hot American Summer. No, I'm kidding, but that is like one of his first roles, and that movie has an amazing cast. That movie's so funny. That's one of my all-time favorite movies, all-time favorite comedies for sure. If you want an idea of like where my sense of humor lies, now that I think of it, like something like Wet Hot American Summer definitely is 1000% up my alley. So everything in that, like I pretty much find funny. Your mileage may vary. Get it? That's one of my catchphrases. Midnight Meat Train, most underappreciated Cooper film. There you go. Midnight Meat Train. Clayton said that he finished his Swamp Thing. Give me a comic book character to draw digitally. John Constantine. Best default voice, Mark Hamill as the Joker. Well, he's very good. I hear that they just hired him to do Chucky in the reboot of the Child's Play movies. While Brad Dourif definitely provides like what I consider to be just Chucky's voice, period, I could actually see Mark Hamill doing a pretty cool version of that kind of a character. So, not against that idea. Almost done with this guy. He finish his pantaloons over here. Oh, Rocket, you and your pantaloons. What do you declare? There we go with some of that. What else we got here? Got a few more areas to black out to make this seem kind of deep and technical, right? I watched something on YouTube the other day. CBS All Access released one of the new episodes of their rebooted Twilight Zone that Jordan Peele is overseeing. It's an episode called The Comedian with Kumail Nanjiani as the star of the episode, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was like kind of like a stand-up comedy version of Death Note. If you've ever watched or read Death Note. Some of the reviews for it like said that they didn't like that episode that much, but I did. I thought it was pretty creepy and disturbing, but I don't know, maybe it just connected with me on more of a level than some people, but it's free on YouTube, so kind of worth a look in my opinion. Chucky is played out. Why are they even making another one? Don't ask me, man. Don't ask me. I mean, I think he's already had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's either had 7 or 8 movies in his like original franchise by his original creator, and now they're making like a reboot, like big studio version. So something like 10 movies with Chucky. That is a hell of a lot. what I'm going to do now are two things. One, I'm going to erase my pencil marks with my kneaded eraser, and then I'm going to bust out some various gray Copics to color this guy in various grays. Favorite Batman film? It's a good question. I would say The Dark Knight. The Christopher Nolan movie, The Dark Knight, is probably my personal favorite. I have nostalgia for both the 1966 Batman movie and the 1989 Batman movie. And I very much also like Mask of the Phantasm, which was a theatrical release, and I like that a lot. I like the Nolan trilogy overall. I like it a lot. Dark Knight's probably my favorite, though, since you asked. The comedian wasn't bad. The humor was written poorly, though. Yeah, that wasn't too important to me. Do you think anyone can learn to draw? I do, Asher. I do. I don't think everybody can learn to draw great, but I think everybody can learn to draw clearly and draw and communicate in pictures and words. Yes, I definitely think anybody is capable of becoming, if they wanted to be, a comic book artist. It requires some discipline, and it also requires some personal patience with yourself to accept that what's in your head may not be translatable to looking like a very specific artist that you like. You're going to draw in your own style at the end of the day. And if you can become sort of okay with that, you can definitely become a good artist. But yeah, if you can just sort of keep dedicating time to learn sort of the basics of how to communicate with drawing and how to use various techniques just to get form, shading, and storytelling and structure down. Yeah, I definitely think anybody could learn to become an artist. Some people are like, oh no, I can't draw to save my life. And I'm like, I don't know. I think you could. I think you could. But don't take my word for it. Begins was the bomb. It was all about Bruce and bats. The Nolan movies were good, but I just feel miserable watching them. Really? I feel like, they're still like, he heroically triumphs and stuff. Do you think John Romita has gotten better or worse over the years? Yeah, I think that he probably has improved. I think that it all depends on how much time he has to devote to a project. I think that when John Romita Jr. has plenty of time, his work is amazing. And when he has to hurry, it just looks cartoonier than otherwise. But I think that he's incredible. He can work very, very fast and do a lot. And yeah, I like his work. Good question. Apparently, I'm also getting texts from my mother, and she's watching. I thought my mom was just texting me. She was saying good show. I thought she meant the last comic tropes I made, because I hear that my sister made her watch it. Mom, did not realize you were watching this. Thank you. I guess I better watch my mouth. No, I actually try to behave on this channel with my language because I don't want to get demonetized. So, not too much of a concern. It's pretty much family friendly. My family friendly. Friendly to my family. Yeah, so there's first of all, my iteration of Rocket. And then I thought it would be fun to sort of break out some of my awesome grays. Let me see where can I put these? I know, move this aside. So I've got a range of 10? Is it 10? 3? No, I've got 12. 12 grays that I can choose from. So I'm going to go pretty dark for the first one. It's good to uncap both ends so that it doesn't bleed. It can bleed on you otherwise. And I'm just going to color in his nose. Pretty dark gray. And actually I sort of wish I hadn't even gone quite that dark, but that's okay. That's okay. And then I'm going to drop down a bunch to do a little more of his nose. This bit here. And we'll keep going. Bunch of folks saying hello to my mom. Can you do an episode on why Captain America is the villain and Red Skull is the actual hero of the people? No? What? What? How is that? That is weird. I don't understand that opinion. Do you sketch this stuff freehand, Chris? No. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. Let me see. I've got some freehand stuff here. Let me see. But sometimes I use reference and sometimes I draw freehand. Let me see what I've got here. This was freehand. You can sort of see there's like a little more of a sort of open line work, a little more maybe energy to it. That was freehand. What else was freehand? This Freddy Krueger was. I don't really love how this came out, but I'm just, you know, but there's a sort of a freehand Moon Knight. This was a freehand King Ghidorah that I sort of bailed on. Anyway, just letting you know that like some of it is freehand and some of it is referenced. It really all depends. Alec Baldwin needs to play Batman. Oh yeah, he would at least do a good voice. Are those warm or cool grays? These are all cool grays. These are all cool grays. What do you mean by freehand? Freehand just means without reference, like just pencil on the paper. These things, like this one, I had a, I took a photo of a Hot Toys Rocket Raccoon that I have. It's a 6-scale action figure. It's an actual 3-dimensional object. I took a photo of that. I printed the photo out. I lightboxed it to just sort of get some of the basic details. And then I sort of like decided to find it in my style by inking it. Hopefully that makes sense. And now I'm using a number 4 to do sort of his main fur. And Rocket Raccoon is brown, not gray. Raccoons can come in sort of different colors, but I'm going to do this drawing 100% in grays, just shades of gray, as though it's a black and white comic or something. In fact, it would be really fun if I owned some Zipatone to use some of that to indicate texture, but I don't have any. Next time I go to Japan, I'm going to bring back a bunch. And right now it might not look like much of anything, but once I have a few contrasting grays and then like go back in to sort of add shadows and stuff like that with different colored grays, I think that'll start to sort of get a little more form to it all. That's my goal here. And if I draw with quick little strokes, it can sort of even give a lot of this a texture of fur. So my last episode was about The Tick, a comic that meant a lot to me growing up, just sort of introduced me to the world of more independent comics, humor comics, the idea of a local artist sort of becoming a comic book artist. So it meant a lot to me, but I was curious, like, anybody out there, like, watch it and get anything out of that one? Hopefully it meant something to at least some of you out there, whether you know about The Tick or not. I definitely recommend it. I think it's a very funny title. Very funny. Great episode. Spoon. Rocket is Brindle, isn't he? I think so. Claiming the Red Skull as your spirit animal would just cement everyone calling you a Nazi. Absolutely, yeah, he's a Nazi. So, like, I don't see how anyone could see any iteration of the Red Skull as a hero. That doesn't quite make sense to me. Unless you're... Maybe, like, some people are so far to the right that they like his beliefs? I don't know. Hope not. Pretty despicable villain. A villain that, like, even other villains kind of despise, you know? I always liked, there was this comic called Acts of Vengeance that Marvel did, a crossover where a bunch of supervillains teamed up and decided to swap the heroes that they normally went after. They'd go after each other's heroes in an attempt to throw them off balance and maybe, like, you know, just get rid of the good guys once and for all. That was their plan, their evil plan. And when it was over, Magneto revealed that the only real reason he even did it was so that he could get close to the Red Skull and throw him in a vault, because Magneto is, beyond being a mutant, he's also Jewish, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And the Red Skull is a Nazi, and I kind of always, like, loved the idea that, like, Magneto had this ulterior motive for being in Acts of Vengeance. It gave him a little more depth than your typical villain. There was a lot to like about that. I like when villains hate even worse villains. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I just finished reading Batman Captain America before I hopped in stream. Joker is disgusted by Red Skull. Yeah. Venture Brothers did a parody of him called Red Death, voiced by Clancy Brown. Isn't Clancy Brown a badass voice actor? Yeah, the Red Skull was discovered by Adolf Hitler. He's, like, supposedly just like a bellhop, and, like, Hitler grooms him to become, like, you know, some, like, sort of right-hand man, and then, like, he experiments and turns his face into a red skull. Whoops. Nice move, numbnuts. Warm colors can be red, orange, and yellow. Cool colors are blue, purple, and green. Yes, that's true. Marvel comics are SJW trash these days with bad art. Well, that's your opinion. Your opinion, I think, is wrong. But whatever. I mean, you're allowed to like and dislike whatever comics you like. But if you're going to just sort of, like, lump everything together like that and just say, like, discount everything, you're probably going to miss out on some good stuff. Let me just put that out there. Just like some people say, like, oh man, everything that came out in the 90s was trash. And you're like, no, man. There's no decade where, like, everything that came out was trash. There's no time when everything a certain publisher did was trash. Like, there's always a mix of good and bad. But I'm not saying anybody has to like anything. Like, that's, you can like whatever you like. Copic makes a specific paper that that lets the ink stay wet and float on top. Yep. A lot of comics today are horrible. I mean, whatever, guys. There's a lot of negativity in the room tonight. I definitely got to say I prefer when we're all just like talking about some of like our favorite or pieces, or like what works in comics. You know, like what were interesting places in history, and even speculative stuff like, you know, is X stronger than Y. Doesn't do you much good to get too hung up on parroting what other people say. Great. Seven to Eternity, awesome. That's another writer that I really admire. I think I've said that before. Rick Remender. So if you want to see him tackle fantasy, he does a lot of sci-fi. He's done superheroes. He's done horror. But Seven to Eternity is essentially his version at high fantasy. So I definitely would recommend giving that a watch. It's pretty interesting. A watch? A read. Excuse me. I like Rocket's attitudinal pose. I think it's just funny, like, that such a tiny little character is always carrying around this massive gun. But I also like that they gave him, in the movies, like, his sort of expertise, I think you could call it, in high-tech weaponry. It's pretty funny. Let's go with, I'm going to use primarily Cool Gray 2 for his weapons, and then I need to figure out what color I want to use on his suit. That one I haven't quite decided on yet. Because he's got an orange jumpsuit with a few darker areas that I can color in dark gray. But I need to think, like, you know, what would look good as an orange when I have to use shades of gray? Like really light, really dark. Gotta think about this. Decisions. I use blender markers sometimes. Works good, but I do not enjoy. I like Jack Cole's Plastic Man and CC Beck's Shazam. Yep, that stuff's fun, man. There were some really cool comics in the Golden Age that were funny and just exciting and different, and those are some of them. Leaving a few areas a little open right now for highlights. But most of this is getting colored in a very light gray. A reflective gold lame 80s style Flash Gordon jumpsuit. Okay. I'll get right on that. That would be a funny look. So I still have, after this, let me think, I've got a bunch of commissions that I committed to doing to help my friend out. And by the way, his GoFundMe has been very successful. I'm glad that I could contribute to that. He just had a tough financial setback, and he and his girlfriend are trying to move out of the home that they own and move to a better neighborhood. They've had a lot of really dangerous, like, serious crimes. We're talking murder, and they've actually had bullets go through their house. Now, they weren't there when it happened, but, like, they were out doing errands, but they had literal bullets punch through their kitchen. So they need to get out of there, and because of the financial setback, he sucked it up and started a GoFundMe, hoping that like friends and family would be in a position to help, and fortunately they were. So I'm glad that I was able to do a little something by doing these commissions. But that said, let's see, like I've done now I think 6, so I've got like something like 9 left to do. I've got a bunch. Are you planning on covering all the different Spider Women like Miss Marvels? Maybe someday. Maybe. I hadn't like had a plan to do it right now, but maybe. I wish they had used Scarlet Witch instead of Captain Marvel as the new hope in Endgame. Yeah, she is very powerful. But you know, they needed to add a couple more female characters to the mix. There aren't that many right now. All right, see ya, Genre Chowder Studios. Thanks for jumping in. Terrifics has been a great read. I've heard that, Spitter. I remember when the computer-drawn glossy page comics were a treat. Now I want comics to go back to newsprint paper. Is that too much to ask? You know, I would go to newsprint in black and white, like because they like with color, it's gonna look muddy at this point. But I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea at all to go to newsprint as an option, because I think that comics do need to be cheaper. But don't take my word for it. That's a callback, because I said that earlier. Pretty sure that's what Jordy used to say on Reading Rainbow, right? LeVar Burton. Pretty sure. He's trying out new catchphrases on us. Yeah, I was thinking of this one. Biff Bang Pow. Comics aren't just for kids anymore. I feel like that's got to be the title of a lot of different newspaper articles over the years. Comics aren't just for kids anymore. Biff Bang Pow. Just trying a few little sort of light blending things here, giving this version of Rocket a little bit of depth every once in a while. Thinking this will be the main color for his suit. Can always go darker, so let's just see. Yeah, I think this is going to work. So actually I'm going to switch it over here. So I can do nice broad strokes. Would I make a video about My Hero Academia? I definitely will at some point. That actually is a book that I read and enjoy. So yeah, at some point I will. And I was introduced to that comic through my channel here, because there was a viewer from Mexico, Karen, who mentioned it a few times, and based on her recommendation, I checked it out, and I really enjoy it. It reminds me quite a bit of the New Mutants title in the 1980s, because it's all about students that are born with powers going to like school to get trained in them. So that's what it reminds me of. Society discriminates against comic book fans. Yeah, well, maybe out here it does a little bit. Let's see. I hope Guardians 3 has 80s music. I wouldn't be surprised. But you know what it could jump to? It could jump all the way to 90s, because think about it. Craiglin got a Zune. Wasn't that like the late 90s when that came out? Could easily have 80s music on it, but it might jump even more recent. Not sure. Not sure. We're coming along all right on this guy. I think we're getting pretty close to having it in a workable form. Yeah. Now I just need to add a few darker areas. But I think we're coming along. I think I'm liking this. I'm thinking about doing commissions, but I don't think anyone wants to deal with shipping from Asia. Do you think digital scans plus full color version via email would make people happy? I don't know. That's a tough call. That is a really tough call if that's what you have to deal with. I think that the average person that's asking for a commission would prefer a physical piece of artwork, like the original at that. But what you could specialize in potentially are smaller digital pieces that people could utilize through various social media platforms. You know, come up with icons and banners and stickers for them. That might be something you could create that you could provide digitally that people would be willing to pay for. Just brainstorming. Because I do agree that like adding the cost of international shipping is intimidating. That raises the price quite a bit. So that is a challenge. But yeah, consider like what kind of art people use digitally on various platforms, and maybe that's something you could specialize in. And if it's smaller pieces, maybe you wouldn't have to charge as much. Good way to maybe get your foot in the door. But that's all I can think of right now off the top of my head. Let's see. As soon as I finish coloring in the various areas I'm going to color in, I'll just go back in with like one notch different to like darken a couple little shadowed areas to give it some roundness and depth, and then I think I'll basically be ready with this piece. Did you ever want an MP3 player that wasn't an iPod? My first one back before like Apple got its dominance was what did I get? Like I got some sort of I can't even remember what it's called. It wasn't a Zune, but it was something by Dell, I believe. See you, Kurt. And I see you, Jalopy Joe. Appreciate you guys jumping in. I did get my tickets to Endgame, specifically, actually. Chrissy got us our tickets to Endgame, so that was very nice of her. Let's see here. I think if I jump down to this, it might work. Let's see here. Yeah, needs to be like one darker maybe. All right, let's see what that does. So I'll go one darker. Sometimes it's almost intimidating having so many options. Yeah, this is working out all right. I'm happy with this. Zune was Microsoft. Yeah. I had something from Dell. The Eternals were created by Jack Kirby, who also created the New Gods. That's true, James Gleason. And on top of that, they sort of form a loose story together if you also factor in Jack Kirby's stories with Thor. He sort of had an idea about the death of the old gods and the birth of the new gods, and it forms a rough, very rough trilogy, because you don't have exactly the same continuing characters, but you have some of the repeated themes of the idea. So it does sort of continue. It goes from Marvel to DC and then back to Marvel. So kind of interesting to see that take place. Just throwing in a few sort of highlights here and there to make this all pop a little bit. Don't know how successful it is, but you get nothing if you don't experiment. I kind of like it personally. All right, everybody. I guess it got a little quiet at a certain point. How was your weekend, Chris? Well, this is my weekend. Today is my Saturday this week. So yeah. Dell Digital Jukebox, that might have been it, L.S. Grieger. Who was the World War II hero that did comics as well? He was a scout. I think you're talking about Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was a scout, and he, yeah, kind of a dangerous job, actually. I've got an episode about Jack Kirby talking about his Inhumans, and I talk about the things he did during World War II as well. So might recommend checking that one out so that I'm not just repeating myself. But yeah, he's a brave guy, I think. So I think there we go. There's a version of Rocket Raccoon done purely in shades of gray. And what I can do now is, for anybody that is stuck with us, is I can zoom in just a little bit, and you can see that. I think that can work. It's a little blurry, the actual image, but like I mean, like the actual image isn't, but like the camera is making it blurry. So here we've got his sort of sci-fi weird gun that I tried to just it's sort of a comic book cheat. You can throw in a bunch of areas in dark and then just like hint at sort of like all sorts of, not gears, but like components and stuff to like give it some depth. You just need to have a good sort of overall outline there. And then just through like, hopefully I added some expression to his face, and then through to a little bit of detail on his fur and his outfit and everything like that. Very subtle color on the actual jumpsuit, but wanted to be able to have at least something that in person, I will say that like that jumpsuit contrasts with the white background a bit more. So we'll zoom back out, and yeah, I guess that'll do it. I sincerely appreciate the super chat from Jefferson. That was awesome, and appreciate the questions. Can you name a single gender fluid character in film? I can't. Yeah, there's some indie films where people have fluid genders. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there's definitely been stuff like that in film. Ellis Grieger's reading Lock and Key. That is a wonderful book. Can't wait to someday review that. Probably I want to do that for like, my October theme month of like horror or something like that. So anyway, let's see. The old trash panda's awesome. Thank you, watchful and harmonious subscriber. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you to Yard Ape. I wouldn't have been able to draw in chat. Oh, it's fun to talk while you're drawing. That's fun, trash panda. Nice stream. Looks good. I actually watched all of it. Well, thank you, Lil Snickers. Yeah, you were one of the first people to punch in. Thanks for staying with me the whole time. I had a good time. Let's see. What time is it, actually? The video's been going almost 2 hours, so that's plenty of time. I was giving a little bit of thought to drawing one more. Okay, hold on. My sister says that I didn't stripe his tail. So apparently I didn't realize that he's supposed to sort of have striped bits across his tail. So here you go, Gene. Good catch. Good catch. Is this looking a little more appropriate? And then I'll do one more thing here. Just come in with one last touch. Like that. All right. My sister says that looks better. So, she knows animals. So I will trust her on this one. I might know superheroes. I might know drawing. She knows animals. She says he needs a more detail to get his tail right. So I did that. Thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. Don't call him a raccoon. He doesn't even know what that is. Have I done a tropes episode of yourself? That would be sweet. I've got an idea for that, Expendables. I made a comic book, a 60-page Transformers story when I was 10 years old, okay? It's terrible. That might be fun to someday review and show with you. That would be the closest I could say to like an episode about myself. I think that you guys might get a kick out of that. How do we know your sister really said that? You don't. You have to trust me. Forgot to mention I absolutely loved your Tick episode. Thank you. I appreciate that. Shazam or Miracle Man? Shazam. Shazam I like a little bit more. Deconstruction's interesting, and Miracle Man was an interesting take by Alan Moore, but I love the fun of this stuff by Otto Binder and CC Beck on Shazam. Captain Marvel. All right, is your comic book better than Future Shock? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And Future Shock is not a good comic, but my Transformers comic is pretty derivative, redundant stuff. It's pretty funny. I'll show it to you sometime. Like I say, 60 pages. Like, what kind of 10-year-old sits down and makes that many pages? Like, you could understand a 10-year-old doing maybe like and I might have been 11, but like, 10 or 11. I mean, maybe you do 5 pages or 10 pages. 60 pages? What was I thinking? Anyway, all right. I really do need to take off. It was a little bit of a long stream, but I had a great time with everybody. So I'll probably actually be doing another live stream tomorrow. So keep your eyes out. Thanks for watching. Keep reading comics.